I'm Morgan Hoffman with Playtry, and today we're going to learn how to change a clincher tire. Clincher tire is any tire with an inner tube. So to change a flat tire, you're going to need some supplies. First thing that you have to have is a pair of tire levers. You can get away with one lever, but two is a lot easier. I use the Pedro's levers. I find that they're a little bit hardier than some of the other varieties, but any lever will get the job done. Levers usually run about $4 to $6. You're going to need either CO2 cartridges, to these guys right here. I recommend a 16 gram for a road bike and a 20 gram for a mountain bike, and a CO2 inflator, which is an inflator that is going to activate the CO2 to fill your tires. You can also get some kits that have CO2 and an inflator to get you started. Or if you don't want to use the CO2, you can also use a small hand pump that would attach to your bike. I personally prefer the CO2. One, it takes up a little bit less space and weighs a little less. And honestly, once you know how to use it, it's actually a lot easier to use. And last, of course, you need a spare tube. There are 4 things you have to look at when you're buying your tubes. And fortunately, all of them you can learn just by looking at the wheel of your bike. The first 2 things are size. So first of all, the wheel diameter. Most road bikes are 700C. Mountain bikes are usually going to be anywhere from 26 to 29 inches, but with a BMX bike or cruiser or kids bike, you could have something completely different. And then you're also going to look at tire width. And both of these items can be found on the side wall of every tire. So you can look at your tire and know what these are. The other 2 things that you need to look at are in regards to the valve stem. So your valve stem is going to be one of 2 types. First is a Presto, which is kind of a skinnier valve stem. It has a nut at the top that you release to fill the tire or to let air out. And the other type is going to be a Schrader valve, which is a wider valve stem and has a pin in the middle of the inside of the valve stem that you can push to either release air or fill. You also need to look at valve stem length. So especially if you have a deeper rim tire, make sure that you have something that is going to be long enough to actually extend past the edge of the rim so that you'll be able to fill the tire. If you're not sure how long your valve stem is, you can always just measure it with a tape measure to be sure. Tubes usually come either boxed, like these here. You can also find some of them now shrink wrapped. I actually really like the shrink wrapped ones. They fit a little bit easier into your flat kit for transportation than the boxed ones will. I do recommend that you have all of these items in a bag on your bike at all times. Even if you're not 100% confident using them, there's a good chance that someone in the group you're riding with is, and that way you have the tools that they need without having to use their own tools. All right, so when you've got your supplies, you are ready in the eventuality that you will have a flat tire. All right, so we're gonna simulate this now, and I really want to recommend to you, do not wait till you actually have a flat, when you're on a ride and out on the road, to test your flat changing abilities for the first time. Take the wheel from your bike, deflate it, which is what I'm about to do now, and test it at home so that you're confident if something happens when you're out on the road. So I'm going to go ahead and deflate this tire and give myself a flat. Now, one of the things that is really important if you have a flat out on the road is before you start to change it, is go ahead and make sure that all the air is out of the tire. It will make the rest of the procedure a lot easier. So if it's just a little flat, go ahead and release all the air before you do anything else. Okay, so once you've got the wheel off your bike, you're going to take your tire levers and we're going to remove one edge of the tire from the rim so that we can access the damaged tube. To do that, you're going to take your tire lever and you're going to insert it up under the bead of the tire. And I usually like to do this close to the valve stem. Once you've got it inserted under the rim to where the bead is pulled away from the rim of the wheel, you're going to take the notch at the end of the tire lever and tuck it up onto the spoke. Okay. Once you have your tire lever inserted, you're going to take your second lever and you're going to push the curved end up also under the bead of the tire. And then what you're going to do from here is you're going to run the lever around the rim to release the tire on that edge. Run the lever all the way around until the entire edge of that tire is released from the rim. At that point, that's going to release your other lever as well. We're done with those for now. All right, so now it's time to remove the damaged tube. My particular wheel has a Presta valve, and you'll notice it's got a little nut here. These are great if you get a tube that comes with a nut. When your tire is flat, it makes it a lot easier to inflate the tire, so you don't have to worry about the tube sinking down into the wheel. I'm going to go ahead and remove this nut now because I do want to take the tube off, so I need it to be able to go inside the wheel. You're going to grab the tube from where the valve stem is inserted, pull it all the way out, and then at this point it should be really easy to just remove the tube. Okay. Sometimes it'll be really obvious where the tube has been damaged, and sometimes not. What you want to do to make sure that you don't have any future issues with the tube that you put in, because there is literally no worse feeling than getting a flat changed and having it immediately go flat again when you start to air it up. So you're going to take your thumb and you're going to run it all the way along the inside of the tire, gently, right? Because if there's a piece of debris there, you don't want to just completely cut your hands up. But gently rub the thumb along the inside of the tire. And if you find any debris, you might find a thorn or a rock or something that got wedged up in there that caused the flat, then just go ahead and make sure that gets removed. I also like to check my rim tape. The rim tape, you can kind of see it here. It's tape that's along the inside of the rim, funny enough. Sometimes we'll run into issues with flats if it's not flush around the valve stem hole. My rim tape is good, so that wasn't the issue. Sometimes when you're checking your tire, you might not find anything. It could be that whatever item it was not lodged in the tire, it just gave you the flat, and then you kept on rolling. So if not, no big deal, but always check to be sure. So once you've checked your tire and your wheel rim and you're good to go, it's time to insert the new tube. I'm going to use the tube that I pulled out because it's actually still good. You're going to make sure that you unwrap and use the non-damaged tube. One of the things that's really helpful when you are inserting a new tube is putting a little bit of air into the tube before you insert it. It gives it a little bit more shape and helps it lay better on the wheel. If you're in the comfort of your own home changing a flat, you can just use a tire pump. If you're out on the road, you can actually use your mouth. You really don't need to put a whole lot in, just enough to give it a little shape. You can see this guy still has some shape because he was just recently deflated. When you're inserting the tube, you always want to start with the valve stem. Find the valve stem hole on the wheel. All right, it's going to be the only hole, hopefully, on the inside of your rim. And you're going to insert the valve stem first to get the tube started. Once you've got the valve stem inserted, you can begin to lay the tube on the wheel. It's really important that you make sure the tube is laid flat all the way around the rim. Otherwise, the tube can twist during inflation, and it can actually cause another flat because it can't inflate properly. Once you've got the tube laid, you're going to start putting the bead of the tire back onto the wheel. And I also like to do this again from the valve stem and going around both sides. The reason why we do it that way is because we don't want the valve stem to be pulled one way or the other, because that's actually another thing that can cause flats and can make the tire more difficult to inflate. So take the rim or the bead of your tire and start tucking it into the rim, going all the way around. It'll be pretty easy at first. Make sure that while you are tucking the bead of the tire in, that you don't catch any bits of tube, that the tube stays behind the tire. Once you have your tire inserted all the way around, you want to go around the edge of the space between the rim and the tire bead and make sure that you haven't caught any parts of the tube. That can cause a pinch flat when you start to inflate, and the pressure of the tube gets caught between the tire and the rim. So I'm going to go all the way around, make sure I don't have any tube caught anywhere. Everything looks pretty good. And at this point, you can install your nut back on your valve stem. And your tire is ready to inflate. One final note, some tires will be harder than others to reinstall onto the wheel. Road tires in particular can sometimes be a little bit tight and a bit of a challenge. You're going to run into that challenge usually right at the end of getting the tire into the wheel rim. If you're having difficulty, a lot of times you can use a tire lever in reverse to run around and to push the bead the rest of the way into the rim. But most times, if you keep working the bead long enough, it will eventually loosen up to where you can tuck it into the rim. I'm Morgan Hoffman from PlayTry, and that was how to change a flat tire.